Welcome back to The Different Knock. Over the past few years, I've been astounded by the quality and brilliance of our number 4, Benjamin White. He's been one of our most consistent performers under Mikel Arteta since his arrival in 2021, and his development over that time has been remarkable. In fact, I think his performances are sometimes underrated because of their consistency. There's almost never anything to talk about, and his development has been remarkably linear. So apart from a brief spell at the beginning of last season where we all worried about his new position, he's largely flown under the radar in the wider conversation about Arsenal, despite consistently delivering 8 out of 10 after 8 out of 10 or higher. I've often said that Ben White has one of the most unique profiles in football. And to prove that to you, I want to give you a hypothetical. Imagine you're a scout who's been asked by your sporting director via the coach to find a player with the following qualities. Someone who can play centre-back to a near enough world-class standard in a 2 or a 3, and who can also play right-back to an arguably world-class standard. Someone 6'1" tall, who is physically robust, but also crucially has the athletic profile to get up and down consistently, at one point this season topping the overlapping charts. Someone who can also defend over his shoulder centrally and defend forward into midfield, dealing with the most physical of number 9s. A superb switcher of the football from deep, with a terrific fade on his passing, but also able to stick it up at the back post on the run consistently with quality. Someone able to combine with attackers in the final third to a terrific standard, with sublime defensive anticipation to deal with opponents in your defensive third. A guy with seemingly the mental profile of an assassin, no off-field issues, and a tremendous attitude. Homegrown, with Premier League experience and a good cultural fit, who's also pre-peak. You would look at your sporting director and you would say, I'm going to struggle with that. Find me another player who could do what he does at the top of the Premier League consistently with proof, and I will deactivate my channel. He is that unique. Best of luck. Mikel says he trains like he's in the Champions League final every day, and I absolutely love him. So before I get the usual knee-jerk comments for even asking the question in the title, please know that I love Ben White. But, and you knew that was coming, there are some concerns from some corners of the fan base, and more broadly, about Ben White's ability 1v1. And being totally honest, I'd include myself as among those who are concerned. No player is perfect, but up against Mitoma, Noah Lang, Rashford, and even Ross Barkley last Tuesday against Luton, White's 1v1 duelling has come under some scrutiny. Though I do have some fitness concerns for him at the moment, this isn't just an issue with this season, or indeed just over the last few games. I ran a poll on X to see what the general consensus was, and while there was a marginal victory for the side arguing it wasn't a problem, more than 1,000 said it was an issue. So to the why you even bring this up, this isn't a problem camp, people disagree with you. And stay to the end of the video to find out what I personally think. Constant desire for improvement, working on our weaknesses, and a growth mindset are the psychological non-negotiables with Mikel. So while White has so many other brilliant qualities, I wanted to ask the question. And just for ultimate clarity, I'm talking about when he's isolated against a winger out wide. I wanted to get some expert opinion on this because I haven't coached professionally, so cue Harry Brooks. Harry is an individual development coach who's worked with some huge names in football, taking coaching sessions with top young academy prospects from Premier League clubs, right up to experienced pros still playing the game. He's a fantastic guy. Right from the off, I want to thank him for his time, advice, and energy. And you can follow Harry on X at @hbrooks_coach, and I would recommend you do so. I sat down with Harry and looked through some footage of White in 4 situations to assess what's going wrong, as well as discussing the fundamentals of 1v1 defending overall and what he would suggest to correct it, which you can go and watch in full for free on a 7-day trial on Patreon from the link in the description or as a YouTube member. But don't worry, this isn't one big ad before you click away. I'm going to distill the fundamental teachings from that so we all get something from this. Fundamental number 1, taking command of the 1v1. Before we get into the specifics of the situations, first and foremost, Harry thinks right now White isn't commanding enough in 1v1s. Firstly, while the ball is still being contested, he says he needs to commit to an action a lot sooner to take control before it's under the winger's possession, and once it is under possession, aim to take charge then as well. An example of this is versus Mitoma in the game against Brighton. The ball's bouncing for a while before Mitoma gets it under control, and White chooses not to engage, allowing Mitoma to bring it under his control before he throws Benjamin off with a step over and gets him moving around. From there, White waits for Mitoma to control the entire scenario, and he eventually gets away as White hasn't blocked off either exit well enough. This may be down to his lack of confidence in this situation, aware of Mitoma's pace and his ability to start and stop his fullback, but the principle is there to take charge of the situation and do it sooner, while it's still not under the winger's control. Similarly, as we watch the situation with Rashford play out, the shape of White's run displays that same lack of desire to engage earlier. If he was able to cut Rashford off more like here, engage sooner while the ball is still loose and go and get him, we could have had a more favourable outcome. Then, once Rashford's in the box, White's backing off, And you can see that with Barkley too. He doesn't take action until it's too late. You don't always engage, of course, it's entirely situational and there's shades of grey, but when there is space and time to engage early, and then when the situation is playing out, he maybe isn't proactive enough at the minute. This is something Aaron Wan-Bissaka does very well, taking charge of the battle earlier, being proactive. Harry talks well about the idea of exit routes, wanting to give a player only one possible way to go due to your body positioning and gait, ideally the least dangerous one. Again, something Aaron Wan-Bissaka does very well. Fundamental number 2, weight forward on your toes. As Harry describes, some of the problem is that White is often caught with his weight on the back of his heels. You can see this in this situation against Barkley. He's on his heels with his weight right back. If you stand up right now, crouch down and put your weight on your heels and try and jump off, you'll see how hard that is. Harry says generally good defensive discipline, as much as possible, and probably as you would naturally feel to do, is that you want to be on your toes with your weight forward, as we discussed recently in this video with Zinchenko. Again, against Noah Lang, White appears to be worried about the space in behind and getting done or stood up, which drags his weight back, making a usually very athletic defender sluggish and specifically susceptible to being thrown a dummy. Barkley throws in a step over, Mitoma throws one too, and Lang and Rashford stop and start him well. All of those reactions to cover the inches of space are just that split second too late due to where the weight is, which is all the difference you need in the Premier League. Finally, fundamental number 3, shoulders and hip placement. Not too square, but not too far the other way. Harry says you don't want to be caught too square, i.e. with your hips and shoulders directly facing forward towards your opponent, as it once again reduces your ability to react as quickly as you possibly could. This will be a familiar concept to most Sunday League right backs like myself, because when your hips and shoulders are facing the opponent, you don't have a planted leg to spring off of. However, you don't want to go too far the other way and just be completely side on to the player. At that point, you've just got the opposite problem where they can knock it to the side of you and your feet aren't planted well enough to spring off either. It's a balance. Here, up against Mitoma, you can see White, again, weight too far back, with his shoulders and hips too square on. And as Mitoma knocks it past him, you can see the sluggishness in response time it causes, despite his distances being fine, according to Harry. Here's the thing. As a top-level professional footballer, Ben White does know these things. I'm not saying anything here that's new or that I think Ben White doesn't know. He would definitely have much more to say on the matter with fascinating insight. I'm just trying to break down the fundamentals of the technique. The problem is, you're isolated 1v1 a lot of times, even in one match, let alone over one season. And even though you know the technique, you're not going to get it right every single time, especially against top level wingers like Mitoma and Rashford, who also have their own technique. We all do this in our own lives, myself included. We probably know there's an inverted commas right thing to do, like go to bed early, eat nutritious food, try and read more. But knowing something rationally and being able to explain it is a very different thing than doing it in the moment and putting it into practice. Those habits I mentioned are a lifelong struggle unless you're super disciplined. Sometimes you just don't do it, and there's not really an explanation. There's just so many opportunities to get it wrong. The real question is whether it's happening too much, and that's the crux. And really, that's only up for you to decide. For me though, I think about it like this. Arteta recently gave a brilliant analogy regarding Zinchenko's defensive mistakes, all about a blanket. Take a listen.
But every player's got, qualities that are so good in certain things and you lose in other things. Like when you have a blanket and you are cold and you will try to say, okay, I'm colder here. And I go like this and then my feet are cold. And then I want to put my feet there and then I'm colder here. It's with every play, with every system, with every formation, you have to find the right balance.
No player is the complete package. Transfermarkt says Lionel Messi has scored 721 goals in his career, of which only 24, just over 3%, were headers. Ronaldo has 734 according to Transfermarkt, 114 of which were headers, over 15%. Does that make Messi incomplete, a problem, needing to be replaced? No, you just don't play him as a target man. When we're deciding whether Ben White's 1v1 defending is a problem, we have to contextualize it in a package. Essentially, it's deciding whether we're okay with the weaknesses of a player, of which I do believe 1v1 ability against the very, very best specifically to be one of his, and decide if within the overall picture of the player, we are okay with it and can deal with it as a team. If I sat you down at the start of the season and said, okay, here's a deal. Ben White will do everything he does for us. 8 out of 10s every single week. He'll be a key cog in a title winning team, but there will be a few moments where he gets done 1v1. Would you accept it? I think you would. I certainly would. But when it happens, naturally, we get frustrated. But for me, it's up to the coaches to deal with it because no player is perfect. Can we get everything we want out of Ben White and maybe implement a slight tweak against certain teams or players where Saliba is the one pulled out wide? Sometimes you'll see this on the left-hand side. Saliba goes and engages the runner and Gabriel will sweep, which suits them better. So maybe we could do that on the right. Alternatively, you can use different players there for certain games. But for me, I don't think it's a case of needing an improvement on Ben White because his profile is so unique. I think it's about allowing for the fact that all players have weaknesses. For me, it's like any good relationship, romantic or otherwise. If you want to chuck it away the moment it's not functioning at 100%, you'll struggle, I think, to find any deep connection or nourishment. It's about working on it, accepting that compromise is natural. White has so many good qualities that I think it's about finding ways of not putting him in those compromising scenarios. And also, players improve. Ben White could very well, in the next few years, cut this out of his game, and I, for one, would absolutely back him to do that. What do you think? Let me know in the comments. I absolutely love Ben White. I love his nonchalance, I love his candor, I love his bravery, and we wouldn't be where we are without him. Let's help him, and let's help each other. If you like The Different Knock and want to see more, you can access our bonus content on Patreon and YouTube memberships for just £3 a month.